Hi, Michael.
Hey
Hi.
Rachel, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you? Yeah, I just asked that. Sorry, I'm
I
doing
did both
multiple
say
things
it.
right now.
Hello. I'm afraid I will butcher your name if I pronounce it. I'm sorry. Welcome. Okay. Let's just get started and share my screen here. So, have both of you, oops, wrong screen. Not future. Have both of you attended the end user training number 1?
Yes, but it was a while ago.
Okay.
I did it like last week.
Okay, good. Can you see my screen here? Oops.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
All right, so this is end user training number 2. Okay, session number 2. And in the first session, I would have covered the dashboard area, start, people, tools, and documents, and stop there. In this session, we're going to cover the assess page and how to use that, how to document assessments, create POA&M items, tasks, all that stuff. We'll go over the SSP, your FutureFeed, deliverables, and then wrap up the training. So it's just us two, it looks like. Well, 2 of you, 3 total of us, and feel free to interrupt me along the way. Okay. I'm going to just jump right in. Well, first, do you guys have any questions? Anything related to the first training or things you're stuck on that I could cover quick?
No.
Okay. All right, well, so the assess page. Okay, most people are using FutureFeed to prepare for their first C3PO assessment. But once you get assessed, I would expect that you would use the assess page to document your continuous monitoring results if anything failed throughout your continuous monitoring um, review process. If you had a failure, then you would want to make a POA&M, right? So marking things as not met to create that POA&M in the assess area. And also when you do your annual security control assessment, you might want to document those results in here, and that way, as you're capturing new evidence for that annual assessment, it's housed in FutureFeed. And for your next triennial certification assessment with a C3PAO, you're going to be able to show them in FutureFeed that history of continuous monitoring and annual assessments, all of the evidence that you collected throughout those efforts and what you used to validate. And all of that then is also used I mean, not only is it proof that you need for continuous monitoring or an annual assessment, but then if you collect that every year and throughout the year, then all of that is proof to the C3PO assessor that your company has remained compliant and is doing continuous monitoring and is doing the annual security control assessments. You're going to see all that in FutureFeed, as well as the evidence that you have in FutureFeed. It really depends on what you're doing for continuous monitoring or annual assessments. But for me, when I was doing um, RMF, RMF 853 authorization projects, we would get our ATO and it's good for 3 years. And every year we're doing annual assessments and continuous monitoring throughout the year. So we made it part of the process that when we do our annual assessments and our continuous monitoring, we collect new evidence and upload it into our tool. At the time it was EMAS, but you would upload it into FutureFeed. So that way your body of evidence is always updated, accurate, and ready to be assessed in FutureFeed. But again, it's, Everyone can set up their own processes. I would recommend collecting new evidence and housing it in FutureFeed throughout the year. All right, so all of that activity, preparing for external assessments, evaluating level of compliance, identifying any gaps, as well as continuous monitoring and annual assessments, I would expect a lot of that activity to be done in this assess area. It's just where you're documenting the requirements and their status. A lot of this information is being used to build out your system security plan. So every control has these 5 areas here. They're going to have this top section, which gives you the place to define at a high level. That's what the summary notes is. This is where you're defining at the control level, at the requirement level, how this one requirement is being implemented in your environment. Then you have down here at the objective level, you have objective statements. So this is where you're speaking just to that one objective. How is this one objective implemented in your environment? All C3PAO or external assessors, they're going to be evaluating your compliance at the objective level. Okay. So I would recommend strongly using the objective statement field. Some folks, they ask me that, and they say that the information they put in these summary notes is almost duplicate, you know, to the information that they're putting in these objective statements. And so do they need to fill out both areas? If that's you, if you're wondering, do I have to fill out both areas? You know, I think they're both valuable. I would say yes, but of the two, a bare minimum, I would say 100% fill out the objective statements, okay? This is going to be what the assessor wants to see. This is what CMMC needs, and this is, if you're addressing at the objective level, then you will be able to identify if you have any gaps in your overall control or requirement compliance. Okay, so every control has this area to define how the control or the objective is being implemented. You're also tracking implementation at the objective level. Okay, so this is important as well, and I'm sure you guys know this, but during an external assessment, if you fail one objective, you do fail the overall control requirement. There's 2 exceptions there where you can get partial credit. There's only two controls that you can get partial credit. So in general, know that if you're going to fail one objective in an assessment, you do end up failing that overall control requirement. And that's why it's important to evaluate and track and define compliance at the objective level. And that's what we're giving you the space to do that here. So every control will have this area here, and then they'll have 5 other sections. They'll have an interview section, examine, test, a place where you can upload some additional artifacts, and a place that will provide you some questions. You don't have to use these questions, but if you're doing your own assessment and you don't know what to ask, you don't know who to talk to, you don't know what to look for, these potential assessment considerations are a good tool to use. That's if you're doing it yourself and you don't really have a consultant and you're trying to evaluate your company's compliance. I would leverage these questions. Okay, the questions look like this. Okay, and these are questions that honestly, I've heard a CCA, a CCP, I've heard a C3PAO assessor ask this. I mean, maybe not this one, but ask a question from this area. And that's because these questions right here, they're being pulled from the assessor's guide, the guide that all assessors follow during an assessment. So a good assessor won't ask these questions right out. That's going to be an indicator that you're working with a very fresh assessor. But a good assessor knows how to evaluate and what to ask based on your environment. But anyway, use these, and you don't have to use them, but if you do want to, you can click on them and answer them. So now, is there a defined number of unsuccessful logon attempts? Yes. And if I say yes, then I'm developing out my implementation narrative. Okay, so here is where I'm describing why I said yes. Where is that defined number of unsuccessful logon attempts? If I said no, okay, then I'm creating a POA&M. Now I'm going to be logging this on my system POA&M. There's an issue. Okay, why did I say no? What's the fix? And it will come pre-populated, as you see here, with some guidance, remediation or implementation guidance. But you don't have to use these. All right, so the other areas, let me minimize them. Interview, examine, test. These are the assessment methods. All C3PAO assessors are taught to evaluate your compliance with these 3 methods. One thing is they do interview, and they want to speak to someone for every control, all 110 controls. Okay, so they will do a lot of interviewing. And in this area, you're identifying the people responsible for implementing this requirement in your environment. Okay, so these are all the people responsible for implementing it. Accountable is the person making sure that the people responsible are implementing it. Any internal, external consultants that you need to speak to about the requirement. And then if there's a change or an issue, who needs to be informed? Okay, so these are all the people that any external C3PO assessors are going to interview, potentially could interview, but also during your annual continuous monitoring and your annual security control assessments, these are the people that you're going to go speak to. Hey, are you still doing what you're supposed to be doing? What process do you follow? Can you show me where that policy is, that procedure is? Tell me about what it is you do on the daily, okay? So this is important to fill out, especially if you're using FutureFeed to prep for your C3PAO assessment. You're going to want all of this information filled out, so that way your assessment prep time and the actual assessment time is cut down greatly. Because let's say next week you have an assessment and you have to figure out who needs to be here on Monday and Tuesday. And on Monday and Tuesday, we're going to be reviewing the PE controls, the incident response controls, and the personnel security controls. Okay, so I need to make sure that on Monday and Tuesday, the people responsible for physical security, risk assessments, and personnel security are here to be interviewed. That's how you're going to use this area. It's going to help you set up and schedule out that assessment. And then as far as external CCA, CCP perspective, these are all the people that they're going to contact and potentially interview. Examine. So this is where all your evidence and your documentation gets housed. Okay. You don't actually upload it here. You're just connecting things here, because over under the documents area, which we covered in the last training, all these documents that you upload here, if you connected them to controls, see here, my audit and accountability policy is going to be found under all these audit and accountability requirements. And so that when you make that connection between your document and the requirements, that is where your document shows up down here. And you can make the connection this way. So if I'm missing something here and I need to make that connection, I'll hit add and I'll go find it. Okay, maybe let's say we should connect that, right? So under this examine area, rule of thumb that I like to say is like up here in your summary notes or in your statement objectives. If you say The company has a process. The company has a document, a policy. Maybe the company has a form or a checklist. So anytime you reference a process or a document up here in your implementation summary, then down below you should be able to find that document or that document that addresses that process. Okay. Same thing with interview. Up top is if you call out a specific team or a role or even a person doing something, then they should be definitely found out in the or be connected in this interview section. And then up here in the summary notes, if you mention some technology that's helping you implement something, maybe we're talking about auditing and you say that you have a SEAM tool that's helping you do monitoring. Well, whenever you talk about a tool or some technology, then it should definitely be found down below under this test section, okay? So test, it's another assessment method we're taught to utilize. And when we test something, what we're actually doing is we're executing the intent of the objective or the requirement. We're executing that control or that objective to evaluate if that response that we got, was it the right response? Okay. So for example, this unsuccessful logon attempt, they could literally ask you, okay, make me an account, and then they'll try to log in and purposely mess up their password. And they're just going to keep messing up their password until your account gets locked out. That's a test. Okay. So if you defined in objective A that after 5 attempts, logon attempts, your account gets locked out, that assessor is going to type in their password 5 times and expect after the 5th time, my account got locked out. Well, if it doesn't, and I'm able to type my password in a 6th, 7th, 8th time, then obviously that requirement is not enforced properly. Okay, so that's a test. And so under the test area in FutureFeed, tests usually involve technology. And so this is where we've decided in FutureFeed to identify all that technology. Now, under test, you want to identify the technology that is helping you enforce or establish, implement that requirement. But also you want to identify those assets that need to pick up the requirement. So all your CUI assets, all your SPA assets, all those things, that's what's going to be found here. Additional artifacts. This is where you can upload any evidence that you want, but whatever you upload here, just know it's only ever going to be found and associated to this one requirement. Okay. So if you are going to upload some evidence and you know that that piece of evidence, you're going to also upload it to 5 other controls because it shows that you're meeting those 5 other controls, then maybe the best place to upload it is actually in your document area, and making sure that it's connected to those 5, or, so that way you only have to upload it once. An example here is this acceptable use policy, actually. Let's go with risk management policy, okay? I think I created this one, we'll see. No, I didn't. This is not one. But anyway, let's pretend that this risk management policy addresses vulnerability scanning and it addresses risk assessments. It also addresses maintenance, right? Because part of my risk management strategy is to make sure my systems are maintained and patched, right? So this document is also going to talk about maintenance, and it's also going to talk about antivirus, and it's also going to talk about my security control assessments I have to do every year to evaluate risk. So anyway, let's say this policy addresses a bunch of requirements. Well, I don't want to go up and upload this risk management policy under each one of those requirements. You could, but in general, then just, upload it here, like I discussed in the first session, and then over in the connect field, connect it all to those requirements. So now you've just uploaded something once, but used it a lot. Any questions so far?
The only question I had is regarding the specific assets.
Mm-hmm.
You're just being general with that in some sense, right? So it's like I saw you just had like Windows 10 laptop. So like, is that just that's just defining all of the laptops that have Windows 10 on it? Like you're not going that deep of
No,
specific devices.
not here. Not here. Think of this as you're just categorizing and identifying the different IT products
Okay.
and IT types in your environment. Now, what was it? Hold on. Let me see. What'd you say? So Windows 11 Pro.
Mm.
Now the only time I personally would log like this twice is if there was a different baseline or a different image. So maybe this is my Windows 11 Pro for my HR team. Okay.
Okay.
But my Windows 11 Pro for, for my dev team, that's going to have more capability. The baseline, the configurations, the functions, ports, protocols, all those things may be different, right? So I would want to log them differently because my evidence is different. My baseline's different. The screenshot, the evidence are going to be different, right? So I'd put them different.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, something like that. So that's when I would list them twice. Now, as far as your entire hardware software listing, that gets uploaded under documents. If you go under lists, the list category, in here you're going to see two tickets. You'll see SSP hardware list. Notice here I can't archive, or essentially I can't delete this entry. Okay, I can delete this one, this document, but you
Mhm.
can't delete the SSP one, and you cannot delete the software one. Hardware, I'm sorry. You can't delete software inventory list and this hardware inventory list because these two are being used to populate your SSP. So when it comes time to upload and provide a complete hardware software listing, you'll go in here and edit this and either attach or upload, or over here you could link to it. Like if your hardware software listing was elsewhere outside of the tool, you could just put a link to it. But right before your assessment, do go into FutureFeed and upload an accurate current hardware software listing somewhere, here, or make
Right.
sure if you're linking to it, make sure that that link is updated. You could house it here even, yeah, a bunch of places. um All right, back to the assess. I think I'm kind of jumping all around, but all right, so this area here, we have some videos you can watch if you need to learn more about the requirement. Inheritance is tracked at the objective level. Okay, so let's read this statement in here. I say that I have Windows endpoints. I say for my Windows endpoints, um, the user endpoints running Windows 11 inherit the Entra ID lockout policy through domain level enforcement. Failed logon attempts are enforced by GPO. Um, okay, let's say that uh, ESP company, let's say you have an ESP company, is responsible for implementing and managing Entra ID. All right, so if your company has an external service provider who's maintaining your cloud environment, and they're the ones responsible for configuring Entra ID and pushing out the policies, there's some inheritance there. So let's say my Windows 11 assets are being managed by an external service provider. But I also have an on-prem firewall, and that firewall is not being managed by an external service provider. But it needs to have a limit of unsuccessful logon attempts because that's the firewall that's protecting my CUI assets. Okay. So, it's a security protection asset in that case. And so my firewall needs to implement this objective. Well, I go on to say that my own internal administrators are the ones responsible for configuring and setting that setting within the firewall management console. Okay, and then let's say we also have Prevail, which is a software, cloud software. And I can't configure Prevail at all to limit unsuccessful logon attempts. The provider of that software does that, okay? So you will see, depending on how complicated or big your environment is, but when I write objective statement, implementation narrative, and I'm talking specifically for the technical objectives, make sure that you've defined how this objective is being met on all your in-scope technology. If that implementation, if you have one statement and that statement is applicable to all technology, then you're good. But it's very common when it comes to technical implementation that you'll have different ways to implement it. Also, maybe you'll have a couple different service providers involved. Okay. And so this is how I write up my implementation narratives. I make sure to address every in-scope asset like this. And now all these things that I'm calling out, this lockout policy. Let's say, okay, I'm saying that I have Entra ID. So I should expect down below under test to see Entra ID. There it is. Now, if I wanted to show evidence that Entra ID has a policy for limiting logon attempts, I could house it down here somewhere, or I could click on my Entra ID entry and I could put it over here. Limit of unsuccessful logon attempts screenshot. So now this screenshot, this piece of evidence is always tied to the thing that created it, Entra ID, and using the connect feature, that piece of evidence and my Entra ID's evidence is all artifact is all staying together with these requirements. Okay. Any questions there?
Nope.
All right. So then just make sure that whatever you say in the statement, it aligns with that little inheritance icon. So right now it says fully inherited, but that's not true because it is fully inherited for my Windows 10. It's fully inherited for Prevail, but I have some responsibility to implement this requirement on my local firewall. So overall, partially inherited. That one objective is overall partially inherited. So make sure those align. Okay, because when you do have something marked as fully inherited, then you could see here, you're not able to set status. Okay, now I would use the fully inherited this only when it came to FedRAMP moderate authorized service providers. Okay, and if you care to know why, I could get into all that, but I think I'm going off on too many tangents. But true inheritance from an assessor's perspective, if you tell me, let's say if you tell me this external service provider is doing something for me. If that external service provider is FedRAMP moderate authorized, I'm not really going to start evaluating if they're doing things or not. They're already authorized by the federal government, okay? I'm just going to make sure that you have the correct body of evidence and all that stuff in place in the CRM. And then I'm going to test your portion of the responsibility, not theirs. But if you say this external service provider is doing something for me and they're just a small town, IT shop that's doing some management for you, they don't have FedRAMP authorization, they don't have a CMMC certification, they don't have anything. Well, don't mark them fully inherited because they got to be part of your assessment. There's actually no inheritance there. They got to be involved in your assessment. They got to be present and speak to their portion of the requirements, maybe produce some evidence, as well as throughout the years for your continuous monitoring and your annual assessment, you're going to want to evaluate if that external service provider is doing what they're supposed to be doing throughout the year. Like if they're doing vulnerability scanning for you every week, then they shouldn't miss a week. You know what I mean? But maybe a year goes by and you review that and you see that they've missed 10 weeks over the past year. Like that could lead to a failure for your company, right? So don't just blindly mark things fully inherited for those type of external service providers, because you do need to essentially almost treat it like, it's part of your own environment and monitor it and evaluate it and mark it met, not met, failures, that kind of stuff. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
All right. I think we've covered this page. Any questions here, any of these sections?
Not on my end.
A couple things, I guess, up here. We got discussion area. So, every requirement is going to have this discussion box. This discussion area here is tied into this discussion area here. You see this up top? So if one thing you can do is, like, if you're going through the requirements and you're evaluating them or attempting to fill out some of this information, if you have questions or you need to ask somebody something, have that internal kind of discussion, use this, and then you'll click on this. So let's see, what are we talking about? Remote access sessions. IT department. Do we have any remote access capability? It's just an internal question. I'm doing my own evaluation and I need some answers. So if I type that here, I'll mark it as a question, or I can flag it as some other things. I could set visibility and hit submit. Now, if I happen to be in this one requirement, 3.1.12, I'm going to see that discussion. See, there's now a number 1 there. I click on it. There's the open discussion. But you may not be in that control. So one place you can look is up here in the discussions area. This is where it's going to show you all discussions ever put into the tool. See all these? I can see all the discussions here instead of having to click and be in that one control to view it. Where's the one I just did? Here, if I filter by questions, I should be able to see it. Yeah, here. Okay. Right. I think that's it for the assess. So over here, if you happen to have multiple frameworks you see in this training environment, I'm also subscribed to 853 framework controls catalog here. And so once you have multiple frameworks subscribed like this, then you'll see this copy framework capability where you could send data from one framework to another, and using our mapping, you'll be able to address some of the controls in that new framework based on how you addressed that same control or similar control in the one framework. So I won't cover that too much. Not many people are subscribed to multiple frameworks, but just know if your company has to also meet ISO 27001 or maybe some other ISO requirements, RMF, FedRAMP, all that, the controls, a lot of controls typically relate, right? I know in ISO 27001, there's a control that requires risk assessment. Well, there's also a risk assessment requirement in CMMC. So I'm assuming you'd address them the same. Maybe not, but that's what that copy framework is for. Okay, moving on, SSP. Pretty quick. I mean, this is pretty easy to go through because the SSP dashboard right here, most of what you're seeing is data that was captured elsewhere in the tool. And now it's just being pulled and displayed nicely in your SSP. So this SSP dashboard, all you're doing here is reviewing, editing, and approving your SSP content. But most of what you're going to see here is being captured elsewhere. So like if my system unique identifier was wrong, I could click on it. I'm not in the SSP dashboard anymore. I'm now actually over here under Start Scope because this is where I log my my system unique identifier. So that's it. Now I've updated. If I go back to my SSP, it's already been updated. Okay. So the again, the purpose of this SSP here is to review, edit, and approve your SSP. That way, when you go under deliverables and you run an SSP report and you export your SSP, you have a high level of confidence that what's in that SSP is accurate because you reviewed it here, okay? And you can use this compliance review box to track and assign responsibility for the different sections and information in your SSP. So maybe this whole scope box here, or actually the system info page, I'm going to give it to me because I'm the security officer and I know about the system information, the system description, boundary, all that. But over under my system environment here, my hardware software, like my IT team is going to give that. So over here, notice how I assign myself as responsible for the system info scope section of my SSP, but when it comes to the software section, I'm going to assign that to my IT guys because they know they can run the software report. And so that individual will be responsible for populating this information or maintaining it. They can mark it reviewed and even approve the different section after it's been updated. Okay, so SSP, again, reviewing, approving, maintaining, and then there's a couple places where information is populated here directly. And so that's going to be the system details. You can see I got some red here, 25 issues. That's all this. So you do have to populate this area, this identifying your tools in use. And then over under system environment, I got some red hardware. Looks like I'm missing my diagrams. And then down here, I have to help provide some information about my devices, okay? So you do fill out some information in here and just see where you see the red. That's where you're missing information. But again, most of it is being populated elsewhere. Any questions on the SSP area? This is a new feature. This literally was just released last Wednesday, okay? So test it out, but the team was getting a lot of requests to be able to control the information that is in your SSP, and I agreed, like, I'm happy, very happy that they pushed this out, okay? Because over under the assess page, let me just show you. One maybe data field that I wouldn't want in there Is this confidence? You have a confidence rating here. Okay. This is more for like internal evaluation and kind of preparing for that assessment. And maybe it's your first time working with this framework. Um, so, and a lot of our consultants use this. So I wouldn't want, like, if I set myself on low confidence, meaning, hey, I'm not really confident that we're actually enforcing or implementing this requirement. Maybe I'm the consultant, and I'm getting a couple different answers. This person says they follow this procedure, and this person says that they follow a different procedure. Like, my confidence level as a compliance management person isn't going to be great. There's some room for improvement here, or we need to do some more evaluating on this control, right? Well, I would want to know that and track that for myself so I can make sure to go address that and improve that area of weakness in the future. If I export my SSP today, I don't want anybody, let's say I'm giving it to a C3PO, I don't want them to see that I have a low confidence rating on this. That's just going to make them focus on that and probably test that control a lot more. Okay. So things like that. User count, we do capture user counts here. Some people don't maintain user counts in FutureFeed, and so that information though is being displayed in your SSP. Well, if you don't maintain that, you don't want it in your SSP. So now you can click on customize and select the different data that you want, and you can select format as well. So this just was released, and if you find any issues with it, please submit a help desk ticket. All right, moving on, your FutureFeed. So all throughout FutureFeed, if you marked an objective as failed, it created a POA&M. In the documents area, you can mark documents as active, meaning that they are approved, enforced, good to go, or pending, draft. Okay, so all of these things here, anything that I add here, all these things are showing up on my system POA&M. Same thing with tools. We have a pending section. So if you're planning to acquire any tools, then you can log them here. These get put on your system POA&M. You can also create different POA&Ms for a tool. So you can click into a tool and, Active Directory, I'm not planning on acquiring it. It's already enforced it, but maybe there's some issues. So I could create some POA&Ms here. So even in vulnerabilities, if you upload your vulnerability scan report, it's going to create POA&M entries for all those open findings. Okay. So all throughout FutureFeed, you're creating POA&Ms. Anytime you create a POA&M, it's going to show up here. Your FutureFeed POA&M, this is where you're going to see a complete listing of all those system flaws, vulnerabilities, non-compliance. And filter, bunch of filtering, bunch of export capability, just play around with it. You can change up columns and views. And then do note whenever you mark something complete, let's say this objective here, we had to define something. So I'm going to say it's complete, done, complete. Now we're not going to delete that. That all just gets logged over here. So this is some proof that you may need to show to an assessor. You are maintaining and you do manage a system POA&M, and here's all the things you've completed over the past few months. Here's what's open, that type of stuff. Okay, but we've implemented this project builder. I'm not sure where you guys are at as your level of compliance, but it can be a lot. There's 320 objectives, so if you failed every one, you could have 320 POA&Ms plus a bunch of others. Right now in this fake training environment, we have 216 POA&M items. That's because I just uploaded my vulnerability scan report, and it's a fake one, by the way. That's not an actual vulnerability scan report for FutureFeed, but I was testing out this capability. But I uploaded a fake vulnerability scan report and it had a bunch of findings, okay? And so now my POAM just jumped up a lot. How I like to manage FutureFeed's real POAM is using the project builder. I like to try to make sure everything is part of a project, or I maybe have a couple one-offs. But typically what I do is I go into this FutureFeed POAM dashboard and I'll filter over here by proposed projects. So you could see like this one, 315, it's already part of my MFA deployment project, and I already have a team and a group working on that. Well, these ones here are not part of a project. So I either need to make sure that this individual is working on it, and then you end up starting to follow up on a lot of items. It could be a lot of items to have to track. So I'm going to try to put these in a project. So instead of trying to follow up on 216 individual issues, now I have to only follow up on, it looks like 9 different projects and maybe a handful of issues that didn't really fit into a project. They're like one-off issues. Okay, that's how I like to do it, because I do need to make sure that all of the POAM items are being worked on. So instead of reviewing and updating all 216, I'm just going to review status, progress on 10 different projects and a couple one-off issues. So project builder, like I said, I just uploaded all the vulnerability scan results. See them all? So what I would do, vulnerability. Okay, I'm going to select them all because I'm pretty sure none of them are part of a project, because I just tested that out a couple days ago. So now I'm going to put all these vulnerability scan findings in one project. All right. And add to project. Let's say, I guess I could put it in like one of the IT projects, but maybe we have an internal process of, this is the September vuln scan finding project, remediation project, whatever. So I'm going to create a new project, September 2025. Create. Okay, so now if I go to project portfolio, there's my new project right here, and now I have a lot more metadata that I can capture. I can get my IT department assigned on this. Maybe my system owner needs to be accountable, or it looks like my CEO, effort cost, more data, project documentation, and then here are all the individual POAM items that are part of this project. Okay. Yeah, that's the project. Then deliverables, all right? So over here is where we have the cyber readiness presentation or report builder. Once you get to a point where you're like frequently logging into FutureFeed and managing compliance in here, closing out tasks, uploading vulnerability scan reports, all that stuff, then you can quickly generate some presentations and reports just based on the work you're doing into FutureFeed. You can pull in all that data. So if I want it, let's say I just did an annual security control assessment. And now I need to present that assessment to my, what are they calling them? Affirming official under CMMC, right? It's the affirming official. They have to log into SPRS and do the annual attestation. So I do my annual security control assessment. I get the score and the results. I make sure I have my SSP updated, all that stuff. And now I'm going to present it to my affirming official, who then is going to log that data, that score into SPRS. So let's build out a assessment report. I definitely want my assessment scope. Maybe that one, sure, that one. But we don't need any of these other, okay? What else? We also wanted to present on my SSP, so we'll present that. Okay. Now I just hit play. It's going to generate for me a presentation. Okay. A lot of data in here. A lot of data gets put in here. There's my scope. Here's my score. There's the date. Hopefully you're at a positive 210. And here's my status. Okay. So, I mean, let me exit out of here. Let's pretend I needed to meet with my IT department, right? I just made that one new project for the 2025 September vulnerability scan. So now I'm going to go down here under my FutureFeed and make sure that I have my different project. Let's see, where is it? It's proposed. There it is. So I want to brief on just this one. Where it is. Here we go. Okay. You could change the theme, canine, military, let's do technology. Over here under setup, I could put my name, who's presenting, what is this? Okay, what'd we say? Briefing of new project. All right. Now hit play, and now I'm just gonna have a report or presentation on that new project here. So here's the project. You know, had I filled out all this metadata in that project, you'd see all that, but then here's all my different items. Okay. So you could start engaging the right people and reporting to them on status. So that's the presentation or report builder. Then over here, you can export your POA&M. Okay, over here, you're just going to be exporting it to Word document. If you want to export to CSV, then actually click into your POA&M area, your FutureFeed dashboard, and over here, you can export to CSV or Excel. So if you have like a, what are they called? A ticketing system that you're using for your company to track POA&M items or tasks, maybe you just download your POA&M results and upload it into your ticketing system, and then you start working in there for project management. So POA&M, you can export the different POA&M listing or the POA&M project listing. Over here, this is where you're going to export and run your SSP report or generate a snapshot of your SSP for the purpose of submitting your SPRS attestation. Okay. Again, you can customize the report that gets generated and exported prior to running it here. But you just hit play or generate new, and then it will log that report under your history. So over here, let's say this is an SSP, this first one. It was generated a couple on what? Oh, sorry. I was like 2026. It was generated here, the 5th of September. So I do want to point out, like, it's not probably, it's an improvement, right? So if you want to approve your SSP or track approval, you can now do that. So after you run your SSP report and you hit generate, then it will save in the history, okay? Then you go find that report and you can click on approve this report. You can, the person actually approving it would log in and be doing this. So I would click my name, approved today. I guess you can approve in the future too, signature. Version notes, hit save, okay? So you can do some approval of your SSP and your cyber readiness reports if you want in this history table. Okay, now it's been approved by me. And if I want to see the approval record, it is different. So you can print off your SSP, and then you would have to also print off this approval record. Which talks about who approved it and the date and timestamp and all that stuff. Okay. Exports. So right before, I'm sure you guys know this, but when you engage a C3 PAO, they're going to want your body of evidence. And like when you first engage with them, they're going to want your SSP, your policies and procedures, some other evidence, because they're going to determine your readiness. Are you ready for an assessment? And how they determine that is they look at that documentation set that you give them, and also they're going to meet with you and talk about your scope and just your readiness. But so whenever you have to provide that body of evidence to a C3 PAO or really anybody, you'll go here and you're going to export all of the files and the data that you've put into FutureFeed. I would recommend going and testing this out, because what happens is you're going to get a zip file of all of the evidence, and then in that zip folder there's going to be an Excel spreadsheet, and that's your evidence matrix. That Excel spreadsheet should list out all of the evidence that's in that zip file. And then it's also going to list out all of the controls that you're submitting that evidence for. So all of those controls that you've have associated. Okay. And that's what the assessor is going to use to evaluate your readiness. And then at the end of your C3PO assessment, what they're going to want you to do is gather again all of the evidence that you used and generated during that assessment, because actually during your assessment you're going to create more evidence. They're going to like ask you for more stuff and have you run some reports. So all of that stuff that you end up showing or sharing with your C3PAO at the end of your assessment, you're going to have to run another body of evidence, export, and then hash it, and then save it locally for 6 years. Okay, so that's where you're gonna come to this export area to do all that activity. We can't hash it. We don't hash it, the file, but once you export the zip file, then you'll hash that and just save it locally for 6 years per CMMC requirements. Okay. All right, any questions? That's pretty much it.
That covered a lot of it. I did have a question. I see that you're recording this. Is the recording going to be available?
Yeah, it is. After I hang up today, it takes like an hour, hour and a half to process, and then it's Zoom. So you'll get a email will be sent out automatically with the link to the recording after it's done processing it.
Awesome.
Yep. All right, that's it. Thank you guys for your time this afternoon. I hope you have a good afternoon. And these sessions they're held every week unless I'm like out sick or traveling. But every week. So we did that because like you guys may not be like fully utilizing the tool right now. Maybe you just got started with FutureFeed. So once you actually start doing things in FutureFeed, if you run into questions or you need guidance, rejoin the end user training sessions. You can sign up for as many as you want. Or do you guys know about the Thursday session? 15 minutes with FutureFeed.
I don't think so.
All right. Let me show you where it's actually a 30-minute meeting. Log into FutureFeed, scroll down to the bottom, 2 links. The first link is where you're going to go to register for this training again if you want to sit through it again, or register for the end user training 1 session. But the second link is for a 30-minute every Thursday at 1:30 Eastern time. I initiate a meeting for 30 minutes, and anybody who's a FutureFeed user can join. So like we just had it today, there was like 20, 25 people in there, and they just asked, oh, hey, I'm doing this in FutureFeed. What's the best approach? How do I do this in FutureFeed? But then also we get to talking about the requirements themselves, CMMC regulations. It's just a really good session. So you just have to register once, and then it will be on your calendar every Thursday. And then I would suggest doing that. So as you start working with the tool, if you run into some issues, just join that Thursday to ask. But you don't have to join every Thursday, or maybe just
Right.
join and listen in. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Or support@futurefeed.co. Always shoot us a help desk ticket, and someone should respond to you within a day or two.
Sweet. I really appreciate this, and hope you have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.